Canadian maple chicken skewers seemed too simple for the popular French show. A special episode dedicated to Canadian cuisine had begun on the famous program, as interest in it had been growing worldwide in recent years. The expectations of the hosts and the audience were particularly high. But as soon as the image of the chicken skewer, the dish that was to be presented, appeared on the screen, the show's participants froze and then burst into laughter. "Is this the dish? Where is the grandeur, like that of a roasted goose?" Dismissive words and gestures echoed throughout the studio. The atmosphere, once filled with anticipation, was replaced by disappointment. But at that moment, something happened that completely turned the tide of the program. A real outdoor grilling tent brought directly from Canada appeared on the stage, and next to it stood a man who, in the light of warm lamps, silently stoked the coals in the grill. As soon as he began to roast the first skewer, the laughter in the studio died down. What happened and how did the Canadian skewer win recognition? Let's find out together. This story took place on the famous French culinary show called Tastes of the World, which introduced viewers to the gastronomic cultures of different countries and became a must-watch for all gourmets in France. This time, the filming location chosen was Canada. As soon as this was announced, excitement seized the studio. The show's participants discussed their ideas about Canada: poutine, tourtière, pea-meal bacon, Nanaimo bars. Everyone expected to see exquisite and complex dishes from the country often called the wild culinary soul of the North. But the atmosphere changed abruptly when the name of the dish appeared on the huge studio screen. Written on it in Latin letters was skewer. "Chicken skewer on sticks, Canadian street food," explained the host Pierre. For a moment, silence reigned in the studio, followed by snickers and whispers. For the French, chicken is a dish that should be large, impressive, and appetizing, whether it is roast chicken or Christmas goose. For them, a small skewer on a stick seemed like nothing more than a snack. To top it all off, Pierre's joke added fuel to the fire. "The Canadian chicken looks somewhat simple," his words quickly spread through the studio. Even the audience in the hall could not refrain from laughter. Some guests shrugged their shoulders, others opened their eyes wide, staring at the screen. Everyone was bewildered as to why it was a skewer, and looked at the screen with cold curiosity. Pierre, sensing the tension in the studio, smiled tightly and continued to host the program. At that moment, the atmosphere was saturated with disappointment, bewilderment, and disdain. "I heard that the skewer is soul food that Canadians love very much." Pierre's words only made the show's participants shake their heads. Then Pierre decided to tell the history of the skewer. The skewer is a dish with a long history, originating from the wilderness and spreading across Canada. At first, it was the food of lumberjacks and fur traders, and then it became popular in cities, turning into an integral part of picnics and holidays, especially after chicken meat became more accessible. Outdoor grills appeared on every corner, and the skewer became a dish familiar to everyone. When Pierre finished his story, one of the guests spoke up. "I understand that this is a dish with history, but how can these little sticks be soul food? It is not very impressive." His words caused laughter in one corner of the studio. The atmosphere of disdain for the skewer did not disappear. But then, something appeared on stage that was supposed to change everything. "This is a real grilling tent, delivered straight from Canada," announced Pierre. The realistic atmosphere, as if a corner of a Toronto park had been transported to the studio, riveted all eyes. A man stood calmly by the grill. This was Liam MacDonald, a great master of the skewer with more than 40 years of experience. He entered this business as a young man and constantly honed his skills. After working in famous restaurants, he opened his own business, starting with a small grill and turning it into a legendary place where lines formed. Liam MacDonald silently arranged the coals, placed the kindling, and with a habitual movement, fanned the fire. A slight crackling was heard, and the flame flared up, painting the coals a bright red color. Every step of his, from laying the coals to controlling the temperature, was precise and devoid of fuss. Although he was a man of few words, every action was graceful, like a work of art. On this day, Liam MacDonald prepared 3 types of skewers: chicken skewer in a buttermilk marinade, a classic recipe where the meat becomes tender and juicy, with a light aroma of spices; skewer with spruce tips and lemon, which gave a fresh aroma and perfectly refreshed the taste; And finally, skewer with cheese, combining the taste of a special sauce with melted cheese curds to please the tastes of foreigners. This was his trump card, but the criticism in the studio did not subside. Seriously? This looks like a tent at a county fair. It looks cute, of course, but although this was said in jest, disdain was clearly evident in the words. The studio plunged into semi-darkness, and a video clip about the culture of skewers in Canada began playing on the big screen. Nighttime Toronto, the entertainment district, appeared on the screen. Among the high office buildings, the lights of street kiosks shone. Office workers in business suits were coming out of the subway and rushing home. The aroma of skewers and other food reached their nostrils, beckoning them to come closer. The shots where they gather in groups and eat skewers with cold beer might have seemed mundane, but it was a moment of relaxation and part of urban culture in Canada. The camera zoomed in on one of the kiosks, showing the focused face of the griller. His hands deftly turned the skewers over the grill. The hissing of the cooking meat was heard. Fragrant smoke rose. All this seemed torn from the flow of time. But for the people in the foreign studio, this world, full of emotions, seemed far from reality. When the shot changed, and Liam MacDonald appeared on the screen with a 3-inch skewer in his hand, the reaction of the audience became even more obvious. "What is that? It looks like chicken for dolls." These words caused loud laughter in the studio. The guests chimed in. "Look, there are greens too. Is that out of laziness?" Some even said, "If I was served this on a first date, I would cry." For chicken dishes in France, volume is the main thing. A roasted goose must be whole, fried chicken legs, a mountain on a plate, barbecue, a thick piece of meat under abundant sauce. Rich taste, large volume, and attractive appearance. These are the standards of their cuisine. The Canadian skewer, however, is the art of simplicity. How best to reveal the taste of the ingredients? When will the meat be juiciest? What spices to choose? All this is born from subtle experience. But this refinement seemed bland and boring in the eyes of the French, accustomed to grandeur and splendor. At this moment, the camera focused again on Liam MacDonald, a man who silently and concentratedly did his work. His back, bent over the skewers, expressed complete indifference to the laughter and words around him. There was some attractive force in his posture. "He is cool." Although the majority in the studio were still laughing, a quiet whisper was heard. After the video clip ended, the real show began. It was the turn of the roasted goose, the king of French cuisine. A huge golden goose was slowly brought out to the middle of the stage. Its skin, perfectly roasted, glistened in the light of the spotlights. When the knife touched it, juice gushed from the meat, instantly riveting all eyes. Applause and enthusiastic exclamations rang out. One of the guests took a leg, bit into it with appetite, and nodded with satisfaction. Other guests followed his example. The aroma of rosemary, garlic, and spices filled the studio. For the French, roasted goose was not just food, but a memory and pride passed down from generation to generation. In this atmosphere, one of the guests joked, "The aroma from 3 of those skewers probably cannot compare with one of these pieces." His words caused another explosion of laughter. The studio was filled with a sense of superiority. The skewer was reduced to the role of a prop. After the part with the goose ended, the team opened the curtain on the side of the stage. From there, a light smoke and aroma drifted, forcing the audience to peer into the depths. There stood Liam MacDonald. He was calm and focused on his work. The marinated skewers were neatly laid out, skewer in buttermilk, with herbs and with cheese. Everything was simple but spoke of attention to the taste of the ingredients. But skepticism still hovered in the air. "Is he seriously going to grill that here? All our clothes will smell," grumbling was heard. But Liam MacDonald paid no attention. He carefully placed the first skewer on the grill. As soon as the hissing of meat on the coals was heard, a slight tension passed through the studio. White smoke rose, and the aroma began to spread slowly. The smell of chicken fat dripping onto hot coals mixed with the aroma of scorched spices was surprisingly sweet and evocative of memories. The faces of those who laughed began to change. "Good aroma," said Pierre with a surprised face. The guest next to him sniffed the air and replied, "Not bad." Liam MacDonald continued to skillfully turn the skewers. The rhythm, the work with the fan, the brushing with sauce, Everything was perfect, like art. Unnoticed by themselves, all eyes were riveted on him. Although praise had not yet sounded, the atmosphere in the studio was gradually changing. "The smell is good, but the main thing is the taste," someone muttered, as if it were the last line of defense. The skewer in buttermilk marinade was ready first. It was served to each of the guests. Hot steam rising from the skewers slightly blurred the light of the spotlights. The guests took the skewers with an expression of distrust on their faces. But as soon as the first piece hit their mouths, the atmosphere in the studio changed drastically. The first thing that disappeared was the noise. Silence replaced the hum of voices. The host's face froze, but it was not bewilderment, but shock from the taste that exceeded all expectations. Silence spread through the studio. Other participants who tasted the skewer also froze, crispy crust on the outside and tender meat inside. The sweetness of the chicken perfectly combined with the taste of spices. The aroma of charcoal remained in the nose. It was a simple but unforgettable taste. What was previously ridiculed for its small size now seemed like the ideal portion. Rich taste, superb grilling technique, and convenience. All this instantly made the skewer attractive. On the grill, the skewer with herbs and lemon was already frying. A completely different aroma hit the nose. When they tried it, the tender meat and the fresh aroma of herbs perfectly merged together, leaving a complex and intriguing taste in the mouth. This second skewer expanded their horizons even more. All eyes were glued to Liam MacDonald's hands. Frying, turning, brushing with sauce, fanning. Every step was not just cooking food, but art. And his silent concentration made a deep impression on the audience. The skewer, which was previously despised, was now accepted with respect. Finally, the decisive dish, the skewer with cheese, went onto the grill. Pieces of minced chicken fried to a golden crust, topped with cheese curds that melted and bubbled, creating a sound and visual effect. A sweet and salty aroma filled the studio. The image of the bland skewer completely disappeared. When the skewer with cheese was served, the guests took it with a different feeling. There was no laughter, only silence and focused tasting. As soon as they tried it, someone's eyebrows involuntarily came together at the bridge of the nose. The sweetness of the sauce, the richness of the cheese, and the tender texture of the chicken perfectly dissolved in the mouth. Succulent meat filled the mouth, giving pleasure never seen before. This deliciousness came not from sharpness, but from the depth of taste. It was a philosophy radically different from the culture of fast food. It was a carefully constructed journey of taste. The skewer in buttermilk was a discovery, the skewer with herbs, an expansion of horizons, and the skewer with cheese, an impressive finale. It was the ideal, full course on a skewer. "Can I have more?" escaped someone, and no one objected. Unanimous applause rang out. It was not just praise for the taste, but a tribute to the ingredients, admiration for the skill, and the impression of meeting something real. The small skewer was finally recognized as culture and the soul of cooking. When the smoke cleared, Liam MacDonald placed the last skewer down, stepped out from behind the grill, straightened up, and bowed deeply. The applause, initially quiet, gradually grew, turning into a thunderous wave rolling through the studio. The audience began to rise from their seats, continuing to applaud. Pierre, with a serious face, took the microphone. He slowly pronounced, "At the beginning, I myself said that the skewer looked simple. Now I am ashamed of those words." Warm applause rang out again. And at this moment, Liam MacDonald spoke for the first time. His voice was low and calm. "The skewer may be a small dish, not luxurious and not grand, but the time and soul put into one skewer are no less than in any other dish," he added. "Next week, my apprentice is opening a food truck with skewers in Paris. If there is an opportunity, I would like you all to try it." Excitement spread through the studio. Information about the food truck appeared on the screen. "I thought this was just an entertainment show, but no. Today it changed my thinking," said one of the guests. Pierre looked into the camera and addressed the viewers. "At first, I expected nothing. But meeting just one dish can change our view of the world. Today I was convinced of this by my own experience." A few days after the program aired, at 7 o'clock in the morning in Paris, despite the cool weather, a long and quiet line formed at a food truck. On the sign, written in Latin letters, was Skewer, and a photo with the stern face of Liam MacDonald hung there. The young man at the grill was Noah, Liam MacDonald's apprentice. Although he looked a little nervous, his gaze was full of determination. On social networks, the hashtags #SkewerRevolution and #CanadianSkewer in Paris were gaining huge popularity. People who watched the show came to personally taste the legendary flavor. When the food truck officially opened, Noah began to grill skewers silently, but with full dedication. On that day, there were 3 types on the menu, just like on the show: skewer in buttermilk, with herbs, and with cheese. Everything was sold out in the blink of an eye. At the same time, disputes flared up on the internet between Team Maple Hot Sauce and Team No Sauce. Real Canadian skewers must be eaten with maple hot sauce. It is spicy and authentic. Not true. You need to eat without sauce to feel the true taste of the meat. These disputes did not divide people, but on the contrary, fueled their curiosity, attracting more and more visitors to the food truck. Starting with one food truck, the wave of skewer popularity swept across France. Large supermarkets began to allocate special sections for Canadian skewers, selling marinated meat and kits for sauces. Social networks were full of photos of people cooking skewers at home. Elite restaurants specializing in skewers began to open in Paris, and some of them even received Michelin stars. The small skewer, which was once laughed at, penetrated the homes and gastronomic culture of France. It proved that a simple dish can make a huge impression and change the world. The success story of the skewer was not limited to France. News of Noah's success reached Canada as well. In a small barbecue spot in a corner of Toronto, Liam MacDonald still stood by the hot grill, calmly turning skewers just like every day. The line at his tent had become longer. Many came not only for the skewers, but also to see in person the teacher who stood behind the skewer revolution in France. Some showed Liam MacDonald news on their smartphones about Noah's restaurant in Paris, which was recognized as one of the best street foods, a must-visit. Liam MacDonald looked at these photos with a slight smile at the corners of his lips. He said nothing but a quiet, "Thank you," and turned back to the skewers on the grill. For him, praise or fame abroad were not as important as the skewer that was about to be ready to be given to the customer patiently waiting in line. Liam MacDonald's philosophy had always been simple and clear. The heart of food is not in grandeur and splendor, but in attention to every detail. This is what he taught Noah. The coals must be hot enough, the meat, high quality, the spices, in moderation, and most importantly, the soul of the cook. At the same time in France, the culture of the skewer had taken deep root in everyday life. Pierre, the host of the famous show, arrived at Noah's food truck in Paris. He stood in line like an ordinary visitor, and when his turn came, he ordered 3 skewers, just like on that day in the studio. Noah recognized him, but only politely nodded in greeting and continued to concentratedly grill the skewer, paying attention to every detail. Pierre ate the skewer silently amidst the noise of the big city. The familiar taste awakened memories of that day. He remembered the determined look of Liam MacDonald and fully understood that what he tasted was not just an ordinary skewer, but the soul of a master, accumulated over a lifetime. The story of the small skewer taught an important lesson to many people. It was not a battle between the Canadian skewer and the French goose, and not a competition of whose culinary culture is better. It was proof that true value is hidden in simplicity, and understanding another culture can begin with a single bite of food. Today, the fragrant smoke from the grill is not just a sign of delicious food. It has become a symbol of cultural exchange and a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary thing in our eyes can be the most special for others. The small skewer, which was once ignored, has now fully fulfilled its mission. Not as a winner, but as a bridge connecting the hearts of people from 2 different ends of the world.